Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kishore. In this video, we are going to write a Java program that can interact with the MySQL database using JDBC. By the end of this video, you must be able to create tables with a name profile that will have ID, name, phone number, and date of birth columns, and an auto incrementing value to the ID. Then you could able to perform CRUD operations through a menu-driven program that can insert the data which asks you to enter profile information where it also shows the auto-generated ID. Then you can read the profile data by entering the ID. In case the ID is not present, it is going to show the error message. You can also update the phone number by ID where it is going to show the profile information with the updated phone number. Then you can also delete the data based on the ID. Then you can also see all the profile informations present in the table. This video also teaches you how to separate the client logic from the database logic so that it will be reusable by multiple clients. So let's start. Firstly, you must have JDK 17 or later. Then any database is fine, but I'm using MySQL, so it's better if you use MySQL 8.0 or later. Then Eclipse IDE latest one that is compatible with JDK 17. Make sure that you are downloading Eclipse for enterprise version because it supports Maven and we are going to use Maven. Then you must have some basic idea on OOPS concepts, exception handling, and then collection framework. At least you should know how to create classes, how to create objects, how to call setters, how to call getters, and how to use try catch binary blocks, and then how to use collection framework methods. Then basic SQL commands. So I already have MySQL installed. What we will do is we will try to maintain user informations in the table, and we will call it as a profile table, and in that we will maintain profile ID, name, phone number, date of birth, and where ID should be auto generated. For that I'm using MySQL command line. Let us open MySQL command line and let me first create a database. I will enter the password. So firstly you need to create a database. Create a database mydb, then use this database and then create a table with the name called profile. We are going to have profile ID. I will give it as ID. It should be int, and I will make this one as primary key and auto increment. Then name, I will give name as varchar type 20 characters. Then phone number, it will use big int. Then for date of birth, I will use date. And here you write auto increment equals 100 so that the auto increment value starts from 100. Make table is created, and if I use show tables, I should be able to see the profile table. We will insert one record here, insert into profile. Then I will give name, phone number, DOB values. I'm not giving ID. Let me give the name, author, then phone number, some number you can give. Then date of birth should be given in quotes, whether it is single quote or double quotes, it's okay. MySQL supports both, but it has to be in ISO format. ISO format means it should be year first, then dash, month, then date. So we should give in this format only, else you will get an error. So firstly the year I will give like 2024, then 0409. And if I hit enter, it should automatically generate the primary key. To check all the records, you can just use select star from profile without a where condition. since we already have one record, it is actually showing that one record. Let us insert one more record. Let me store another record, Siddharth, and some number, then lastly the date of birth. So I will write date and I will hit enter. Now if I write select star from profile, I should able to, sorry, there was a mistake, select star from profile. And you should also able to get the record based on the ID. If I write 100, I should get only the record whose ID is 100. What we are going to do is we will now write the program in Java to perform the CRUD operations. First and foremost thing, we should create a project. Let me create a project. So I am going to create a Java project. Go to File, New option. I'm using Eclipse and create a Java project. Let us select this Java project and we will give a name to it. Let me give it as JDBC examples. Click on finish. You must able to see the JDBC examples project. This is not a Maven project. You need to convert this to Maven project. To convert to Maven project, right click and go to the configure option and select Maven project. Convert to Maven project. Select this and let the values of group ID, artifact ID, version packaging be whatever the Eclipse has selected, and we will just click on finish. Once you click on OK, you get this pom.xml file source code. Just keep it as it is. We will try to understand what is JDBC and what are the steps we have in JDBC. First of all, JDBC helps to write a Java program that can connect to the relational databases like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, or Derby. What Java has done is they have provided some set of interfaces called JDBC APIs. The JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. And these interfaces are implemented by every database company, like MySQL has implemented JDBC API, Postgres also have done that, Oracle, Derby, they all have implemented these JDBC APIs. So their database can support Java programs to interact with their database. And those implementations are provided as jar files to the developers so that these jar files developers can download from the internet and add to their project in the class path, or they can also use tools like Maven and they can use the jar file in their project. So what we are doing is we are going to use Maven because Maven provides a pom.xml file where we can add the jar file configuration in the form of dependency tags, and it automatically downloads the jar files from the internet. Coming to the steps we need to use in order to interact with the database, there are 5 steps. First step is loading the driver. If you are using MySQL database, you should load MySQL driver. If you are using Oracle database, you should load Oracle driver. Same way, based on the type of database you are using, their drivers you have to load using this statement called class.forName. And in the forName method, you have to provide the package name and the class name. This class is not a keyword, it is a class name, which is an inbuilt class in Java. The second step is to connect to the database once you load the driver. And in order to connect to the database, this is the statement you write: connection equals driver manager dot get connection. And this connection is an interface name, and this is a variable name to store the connection object, just a reference variable name. The get connection method of this driver manager takes 3 parameters, which are URL, username, and password. You need to provide URL of the database, then username and password of the database. If you are using MySQL, root is the username, and the password is going to be whatever the password you have given, and URL we will see in the code. Then comes the third step. Once the program is connected to the database, you should write the statements, that is called as statement objects. These statements objects are Java objects, which helps you to write SQL queries. Because if you are using terminal, you will write SQL query. But if you are using application, the statement object is going to take the SQL query and execute on the database. And to create the statement object, this is the statement you will use, connection.create statement. This connection is the reference variable of the previous statement, and create statement is the method present in connection object. And that helps you to create a statement object. And again, statement is an interface. This statement is just a reference variable. Then once you create the statement object, you can pass SQL queries to the methods provided by statement object. And what are the methods we have in the statement? There are two methods. One is execute query method that takes SQL query, and one more is execute update method that takes insert or update or delete queries, which are called as DML queries. And select query is called as DRL query. When you invoke the execute query method and pass the select statement, what happens is you will be getting some results, and those results will be stored in this interface called result set, and this is the variable name, and you can use this variable to navigate over the result you got from the execute query. And if in case you want to execute, insert, update or delete queries, you need to pass those queries to the execute update, and it doesn't return result, rather it returns how many rows are affected. That is why the execute update returns integer. Once you performed these operations, you need to close the database resources. So you have to close based on the objects you have created. The last one which you have created should be closed first. That is going to be the result. That should be closed first. Then result is created from the statement. So this statement you should close, and then the statement is created from the connection. So you need to close the connection at the end. So that is how you actually write the JDBC program, and these are the steps. But if you are using latest version of Java, this statement class.forName is going to be optional. You don't have to load the driver, because from Java 6 onwards, automatically your program can identify the driver, or it is going to automatically load the driver based on the URL you provide. And if the driver is already there in the class path, it will automatically load. If the driver is not present in the class path, it is going to actually throw an error. So let us write our first program where we will try to retrieve the records which are already present in our table. Then we will try to perform the other operations like insert, update and delete. So you need to open this pom.xml file, which is created when you convert the Java project to Maven project. In case you want to know where it is present, if you open the project, you can observe there is a pom.xml file. There are few XML tags which are created, and you need to add one XML configuration where automatically the Maven will download the MySQL jar file. Firstly, observe what is the version of MySQL you are using. Mine is 8.0.33. So I can always use the jar file version which is of 8.0.33 or some higher version, because it will be always backward compatible. What you do is open Google and type Maven repository, which is going to open this website, and open this website and you can search for MySQL connector. What is this name? MySQL connector is the library name where the JDBC driver is present. You can observe the very first link itself says MySQL connector /J is a JDBC type 4 driver, which means that it is a pure implementation of Java done through Java, and you can go here and observe there are different versions. 9 is there. Since mine is, what is the version number I'm using? 8.0.33. I can go and select 8.0. 8.2 also I can select. So try to select something which is not having any vulnerability. If there is vulnerability in some of the version, probably that would just select 8.3.0, and you can observe the Maven has some dependency tags. You can copy, and what you need to do is you need to paste the dependency you copied in the pom.xml. But where you should paste is you need to be inside the project tag, and you need to create one tag called dependencies tag. That is the parent tag which can keep all the dependency tags. You need to copy paste the dependency tag inside the dependencies. Inside the dependencies, you can copy paste any number of dependency tags, and based on the dependency tag, it is going to download the jar file. The moment you save the file, it is going to download the jar file of MySQL connector. You can observe here. Let us now create one Java class. I will name it as test select, and I will select main method. And we know the steps. There are 4 steps. Class.forName is optional, and I will use 3 properties to connect. What are those 3 properties? One is URL, and another is username, and one more is the password. We will directly perform the second step. As you noticed, loading the driver is optional. So we can directly write connection driver manager dot get connection, then we can create the statement and we can also execute the query. Since our first program is to select all the records, I will firstly create 3 properties. URL. What is the URL of MySQL is? This is the URL jdbc colon mysql colon / localhost, because MySQL database is running in local machine, and by default the port number of MySQL would be 3306 / and remember we created the database called mydb. This is the URL. Then the username. The username of the MySQL database is root. Even the password also I have given root. I will use the same password. We need to pass these things to the connection, that is driver manager.get connection. But remember, all the SQL methods, whatever we are going to invoke from the JDBC API, they all throw some checked exception we need to handle at the compilation time itself. So we need to use a try block as well as the catch block to handle SQL exception, and we will also print if there is any SQL exception. Please import the SQL exception from SQL package, and all the JDBC interfaces and classes are present in this SQL package. So let us connect by using the connection. So import the connection from SQL, and the variable name also I will keep connection. Then we need to use this driver manager class that has a get connection method, and get connection has 3 parameters. Pass the URL, username and password, and it is going to establish the connection. Let me simply check whether I could able to establish the connection or not by just printing that connection reference. And if it prints the reference address, it means connection has established successfully. But remember, you need to close this connection once the job is done. That we will do it in the finally block. But if I want this variable available in the finally block, it has to be declared here like this. Let me create this connection variable here and assign the connection to the connection variable. I will also create one more reference of statement. Notice when you use control space, you get statement from 3 different packages. One is from java.beans and another is from SQL package. One more is from com.mysql itself. But you should always use java.sql, which is the package name for JDBC APIs. And statement, one more thing I will use is result set and result. So connection will be stored in this variable, and we will be creating the statement. That is the third step. Fourth step, after you execute the query, that result will be stored in this variable. Let me now create one more variable called query, which is going to be, what is the table name? Table name is profile. And what is the query you write to get all the records? That is select star from profile. Step, we will create the statement object. And what is the method you need to use to create the statement is, the method name is create statement itself. This is going to create the statement object. And this is going to establish the connection. Next is, we already have the query. We just need to call the execute method from the statement object by passing the query. So this is going to run the SQL query. Because it is a select statement, we need to pass that one to the execute query. And then you will get a result. And remember, this result is going to be an SQL result. You have to navigate. There are some methods in result like next method, and there are other methods also. So you need to use this result dot next method. And what this result dot next does is, it is just going to check, is there a next record to navigate. Once this query is executed, this result would be referring to the head of the result, not immediately to the first row. The moment next method returns true, once you call the next method, the result set is going to refer to the first record. If it has a first record, then result has lot of getter methods. That is, in the result set, there are a lot of getter methods. If you go to result set source code, look at the next method that is returning boolean that throws SQL exception. Then the close method is there. Then there are a lot of methods. Look at here, get string method, where you need to pass the column number and it is going to get a return value as string. There is a get boolean where you have to pass the boolean where you have to pass the column number, where you will get the boolean value of that particular column. That way there are many getter methods which helps you to get the value from the result. And the getter methods would convert SQL types to Java type. Now you can use this id equals result dot get integer 1. What does it mean? It means that you are getting the first index value, that is the first column value. And why you are using get int? Because we know that the first column is id, the second column is name, and the third column is phone number, the last column is the date of birth. So we have to use get int of 1 because first column is id int type. Next, the second column is name. So I will use result dot get string of second column. Because it has varchar, the get string is going to convert the varchar to string format. This is going to take the second column value. Then we can use long to get the phone number. We can use result dot get long is again a method present in result set where you pass the column number. The third column is big int. Big int means bigger than int, so we need to use the get long that returns the long value, which converts the big int to long. So here what is happening? The data conversion is happening from the SQL type to Java type. Lastly, there is a date, but remember, you do not get directly the local date. We should use local date because that is going to represent the date properly. So what happens if I use result dot get date? Look at the get date returns the date, which is of SQL package date. You pass the number, that is the column number, and there is a method called toLocalDate. What this will do is, it is going to get the date in SQL package format. Means SQL package format means it is going to get the legacy date. That should be converted to the local date. So you can assign now local date DOB equals result dot get date. So we are not going to use that legacy date. Now we will print each informations like this: id, then name equals name, then phone number equals phone, then lastly DOB equals DOB. And the result dot next is going to again give true if the next record is present. Since there are only two records, while loop will iterate twice, but remember we need to close totally three resources: result, then statement and connection. That we should do it outside the try block. So that has to be mandatory step. That's why I will use the finally block and I will call the close method. And one thing is, all the close methods of these instances would throw checked exception. You should again write a nested try and catch that has to handle SQL exception. E.print stack trace, and then inside the try block you can write connection. Before connection we need to close the result, then we need to close, and it is giving warning because we have to initialize this to some null because it is a local variable. Without initializing, if you try to access that, it will give null. It is going to give the compilation error. Then statement dot close you have to invoke, and then connection dot close you have to invoke. But there are certain drawbacks by doing this. The thing is, just to call the close method, we are writing try catch. Is there any simplified way? Because too much of try catch block also doesn't look good in our program. There is actually possible where you can use the modern Java syntax of try with resource. We will use that. First, we will run this program and then we will completely eliminate the binary block. First, we will run this program and see what is the output. Look at the output. It is getting both the records, ID 100 and 101, Athar and Siddharth, and their phone number and their date of birth. And I told you that whenever you create the SQL resources, you have to close it mandatorily. But Java modern syntax gives you try with resource closing syntax. What is the advantage of using that? Try with resources. Automatically, it is going to close all the resources. And you should always keep the try with resource only for those instances that would implement auto closable or closable type. It means if I go to connection, let me go to the connection, the source code. Look at the connection interface, which is actually having auto closable. Next, let us go to the statement. Look at this, it has auto closable. And one more is result set. Let me go to the result set source code. It also has auto closable. Let me use the string class and let me open it. Does it have a auto closable? No. So you should use try with resource only for those objects which are implementing auto closable or extending auto closable. Now the try with resource you can use only for on connection, statement and result set. It means you can create all these objects inside the try with resource syntax, and you should create in the parenthesis after the try block. Let me remove all these things. Let me also remove these three lines, and the finally block is not required because we are using try with resource logic. Then what we have to do? We have to write the three lines of code that is going to establish the connection, then create the statement and execute the query. That is like this: connection equals driver manager dot get connection, and we will pass the URL, username and password. Next, we can bring this to the next line, and we will create a statement object now. Statement equals connection dot create statement, and lastly result set. Result equals statement dot execute query. So we are creating all the three instances with the same variable name I used in the previous code, because we are using this variable result in multiple places. Now you do not need to write finary block. Look at this code, which looks much more simpler to write as well as to understand because of this try with resource. And can I still see the same output? Of course, you can still see the same output. This is one of the advantage of using try with resource. Now what you have to observe is these statements which are declaring the variables and getting the values from the database. They are exactly similar to the way we create the variable and assign the value in hard-coded way or through scanner object, isn't it? But this time we are getting the data from the database instead of getting the data from scanner or in a hard-coded way. What we will do after getting the data is we initialize some Java object that will have these properties like ID, name, phone, DOB, correct? We will do the same thing, but we will pass these values to some object like profile object we will create, and then inside the while loop we will create the user object, and this while loop would iterate certain number of times, and each time it iterates it has to actually initialize the Java object. Thereby we will be converting SQL type to Java type object. So what I will do, I will create one profile class here in the same project with the name profile, and we will create totally four properties like ID, name, phone number, and DOB. So ID will be private int, and then name will be string, and phone number will be long. Lastly, the date of birth will be of local date type. Then we will generate a constructor. Let me also generate a default constructor. Then we will generate the toString method, and lastly setters and getters. And now we will save this and go back to that result set program, that is this one. Instead of just printing, what I will do is I will remove this line and create a profile object. Profile object equals, we will pass the ID, name, phone number, date of birth variable values to the constructor, and now you can print the profile object. But what I will do is I will not print the profile object because we probably need to track how many profile objects got created based on the result set, and we might need to send those result to mobile application or web application. They will take care of probably displaying the profile informations in whatever the format they want. For that reason, what I will do, I will initialize the profile and add it into some collection like list. But before that, we will try to print and see what is the output we are going to get. Are we getting the profile information and toString is getting card? Yes. You can observe we are getting the data from the database, and the toString method is actually returning the information of the profile. But we will not print like this. Instead, we will add the profile object to the list, that is going to be an array list we will create by using this list from the util package. We will create the list of profile and name it as profiles. Then array list object we will create, and each time the profile object is created we will add that to the collection. And then what happens now, this list is going to have all the profiles that are retrieved from the database, and we can actually return the profiles list to the caller. But this time there is no caller. The main itself has the entire result set, so there won't be any caller. But in the future we are going to do that, where we are going to return the profile and the caller is going to iterate over the profile. But we can iterate the list here itself just to see how it looks. We will use a for loop and profile p colon profiles, and we will print the profile object by iterating the profiles. And if I run the program, I would still see the same output. But we will try to separate this DB logic from the main method so that it will be reusable to others also. So not only the main method can call these DB logics, even other codes also can call. Like for example, the codes which are used in the application probably would be using some architectures like MVC architecture and all, where M stands for model, V stands for view, C stands for controller. In MVC architecture, what usually happens is, means whenever you develop any application, you follow some architecture. There will be something called a service layer that would actually access the database layer code, or which is also called as the DAO layer code. In such cases also, when you separate the DB logics from the main method, it will be reusable. So we will treat the main method as a service layer and try to call those database logics from the main method, thinking main is like a service layer. For that, what we should do, we should create a method and keep the logics whatever I have written here inside that method, and from main we need to call. Let's do that. So I will create one new class which is called as profile DAO, and this class will have one method. So a method to read multiple profiles. So if it has to read multiple profiles, it has to return multiple profiles in the collection format like list. For that reason, I will create public list profile and method name is get profiles. This method should return the list. So what I will do, I will copy few codes, whatever is written from the main method. Let us try to copy the code and we need to remove few things. What are they means? The for loop which is printing, I will remove. So I am having the same thing, whatever is written in the main, I am keeping it in the get profiles, but this for loop I will remove. Notice the list is present and the get profiles is returning the list profiles. Now what you have to do is once you add each profile object that is created in the while loop, you have to return the profile. But I will do this outside the try block so that outside the catch block I can return the profiles. So this way the get profiles error will disappear. So I create the list here so that it will be visible at this place also. If I create it inside the try block, it can be used only inside the try block. Now let the main method call the get profiles and let the main decide what needs to be done with the list of profiles. Now consider main is like a service layer and service layer might pass that data probably to the controller will pass the data to different end users like mobile applications or web applications, which has to display the data in the web page. Mobile applications has to display the data on mobile page, or if it is a desktop application it has to display it on the desktop. That way think main method is like both service as well as the UI, because we are not going to create all those things here. So let it call the get profiles now. Now you do not need any of these import statements except the list. So what we need to do is we need to call the method present in profile DAO. Let us first create the object of profile DAO. DAO equals new profile DAO, and then the method we need to call is get profiles. And the get profiles is returning the list. Let us use the list profile, and we know how to iterate the list, but you can consider this list will go to mobile application so that the list of profile will be displayed on mobile, and it can go to the web application where the list of profile will be displayed on web page. But here we will display it in the console itself. I will use the for loop profile p colon list, and we will print something like this: hello p dot get name, your DOB is p dot get DOB, and after each print statement of profile we will have on delimiter also. We are just printing name and DOB. So now if I run this program, I should able to still see the same data but in a different way. This way you can separate the data, that is DB logics, from the main method so that it is reusable. Next we will try to insert the record in the database, but to insert the record we need to only pass name, phone number and date of birth, as the ID will be auto generated. We need to create a method to take the user object, means a method to take an user object, that is going to be profile object. Next what we can do is we can store the profile object into the database. For that we need to create one method to accept the profile as a parameter, but here we are going to only pass name, phone number and date of birth, as the ID will be auto generated. One thing is we are going to write an insert query, but when we write the insert query, what usually happens is the values whatever you pass, you are going to bind these properties to the query. In that case, if in case you use a statement object, it is not going to be efficient, because the statement object you use to execute the query will pass that query to the database, and what database does is each time it is going to parse the query, then compile, and it is going to execute. For that reason, you have another type of statement called a prepared statement, where you are going to create the query with some placeholders like a question mark. You are not going to bind the value directly. You would just have question marks which are going to be the placeholders. And then when you pass this query to the database while executing, you would be setting the values and you are going to execute. But what happens is at the database, it is going to parse and compile and store that compiled query in the database. While executing, it is going to change the question mark with that name, phone number and date of birth, whatever you give. So second time onwards, it is not going to parse and compile. As the compiled query is already stored in the database, second time onwards, it is going to directly execute the query by replacing the question mark with the dynamic input you pass. So thereby the efficiency will be much better when you use prepare statement compared to the statement. So you use statement when the query is going to be static, means if it doesn't change, but whenever the query is dynamic, means the input values are changing, then you better use prepare statement, as the query will be parsed, compiled, and it will be stored in the database memory, and second time onwards it is going to be directly executed. So we will use the prepare statement in this method, and I will create a method probably with one return type called int, so that I can return some integer value. It should be ID, but we will see how to get the ID later. But now I will just return the positive value if it is successfully stored. And I will create a method called create profile, which is going to take profile as a parameter. Now we can use the same code like URL, username, password, and then you need to create an insert query, then try with resource and all you have to create. So you might be rewriting the same code. Instead of rewriting the same code, you can actually reuse this connection object creation also, so that every time you don't have to enter the URL, username and password, because it is going to become redundant if in case the password changes in every method you need to change the password. So what is the what you should do is you should actually reuse this code so that only in one place you need to update and it should reflect to multiple methods. But now I will just copy this and later I will do that change. I will use the query like insert query equals. How do I write an insert query is like this: insert into profile and name, phone, comma, DOB values, but I'm not going to bind the profile getter method. I will just use question mark. And I need to change these question marks through the prepare statement method. That is actually the setter methods which are available to set the value to the question marks. Next, what we should do is we should use this syntax try with resource syntax. Let me just write here try catch block. Now, I will create the connection object. Connection, we will copy this line and paste here. Then we will create a prepare statement. Prepared statement equals connection dot prepare statement is the method to create the prepare statement object. You need to pass the query. And remember, you should not execute this query because it has the question marks. We have to execute after setting the values to the question marks, and the prepare statement has some setter methods. If you go to the prepare statement, look at this. There is an execute update, but it is not taking the query. There is an execute query. It is not taking a query as a parameter. Prepare statement is an extension to the statement. But statement was actually passing the query when it is calling the execute. But prepare statement doesn't do that, because at the time of creating the prepare statement itself, you pass the query which will have some placeholders, and these placeholders you will set it through some methods like this, like set short, where you will pass the parameter index and the value, set int where you pass the parameter index and the value. Like that, there are set long, set float, set double. So many methods are there. We need to use that setter methods and set these parameters. That is, you need to use the question mark index and you have to set the value of that question mark to these particular columns. So now, how do we set the value to the question mark is like this. First question mark is updating the name. So we need to call set string from prepare statement, and the name will be there in the get name method. So it is going to update the first question mark with the name. Then the second question mark is pointing to the phone number column. Since phone number is long, we need to write set long second question mark with profile dot get phone number, which is going to update the second question mark with the phone number. Then the third question mark is DOB, but DOB is date type. We do not have set local date. We have only set date, that is the date class from SQL package. So it is not from util package. Please remember, it is from SQL package. When you are setting the third question mark, you need to use profile dot get DOB. However, it is going to give a compilation error telling that set date cannot accept the local date. Look at the error. It says set date in the type prepare statement is not applicable for the arguments int comma local date. So what you should do is you should use the date class of SQL package. You need to import the date class of SQL, not from util, because the SQL package date has one method called value of that takes the local date type. Now you can pass the profile dot get DOB, so that the third question mark is going to get the value of DOB. Now all the question marks are set. Now you can execute the query. But when you are executing the query, it has to be which query? As it is a DML query, you need to call execute update, and this time you need to call the execute update present in prepare statement, not from statement. As prepare statement extends statement, you might call by mistake execute update by passing the query. You should not do that. You need to just call the execute update without passing the query. This is going to execute the query with values. And the execute update returns an integer value. And what we will do is we will create one integer variable here like row count, initially 0, and this row count we will initialize by calling the execute update, and at the end we will return the row count. If it has successfully executed the query, and then the row count is going to be 1. And let us now run this program by calling the create profile, and what I will do is I will create one main method class like test JDBC, and here I will create the object of profile DAO equals new profile DAO, and I will create a scanner object because I am going to take input from the keyboard. So scanner system.in, and then we will close this first, and then we will ask user to enter name, then we will ask user to enter phone number, and we will ask user to enter TOB, but date of birth should be in this format: year, month, and DD, because it is the ISO format. You remember in MySQL also we use the same format. So local date can take this format using a parse method, and you just need to pass the string to that parse method, because we do not have a scanner method to read the local date. We just need to read string and pass that one to the local date parse method. So we will enter the details, and what we will do is we will now create an object of profile equals new profile, and then we will write profile dot set name scanner dot next method, then profile dot set phone number scanner dot next long, and lastly profile dot set DOB. It takes the local date. So what you should do is you should use the local date dot parse method, and here you call the scanner dot next method. And I am first displaying all the system.out.print statements, and then I am initializing. So let me just copy this and cut this and paste here, and let me create a profile object after the scanner, and then we will set the phone number here, and later this date of birth should be here. Now we can pass the profile object to the create profile method. Let me pass that. It is going to return a count. So DAO.create profile can take the profile object. We are passing the initialized profile object, and it has to print the number of rows affected. It has to print 1 if it has successfully stored the record. So if I run the program now, enter name, let me enter the name called Ravi, and phone number some number, then date of birth should be in this format, else it will throw an exception. So 2001, then 1025, and it is telling number of rows affected. And let me run the test select method. The reason I created the insert program in a separate main method is I can run the select program directly, correct? So if I run this, I should able to see that Ravi details also now. So I am able to see the Ravi details, and it is not showing the ID. Let's see what is the ID. Let me print the ID here. Then your ID p dot get ID. If I run the program, it has to show the ID of all the users. So that is how you actually store the record. But I told that it is possible to know what is the generated ID while storing the record because ID is auto generated. For that, you need to pass another parameter while creating the prepare statement. So the parameter should be something like this. From the statement, you need to access one of the constant called return generated keys. And this is going to give a result set when you invoke one of the method from the statement object. So that is going to be get generated keys. So what you have to do is after calling the execute update, you just call the method called statement dot get generated keys. And this is going to return a result set. We will store that data in this result set result equals. Then what we will do, we will invoke the next method. If the generated key is stored in the result, we need to first call the next method to refer to that result, and we need to call the method called getInt1 because the get generated key is also a kind of result set, and it is going to be only one row with one value, that is going to have only one column. That value is what we are retrieving through the result.getInt of 1, but we need to access that row by calling the next method. And what we will do, we will store this to one variable called key variable, and we will declare that key variable here like this, int key equals to 0, and now it is initialized. What we will do is we will return the key. Now let us run the program to store the record and see what happens. But instead of this count, I need to understand that it is an ID. So I write here generated ID. So now let me run the program and enter some name like Vijay, then phone number, then date of birth like this, and it should give the generated ID. So Vijay generated ID is 103, and if I run the select query program, I should able to see Vijay whose ID is 103. So that's how you could able to get the generated ID. The next thing what we can do is we can update the profile informations like phone number based on ID, and also we can delete the record based on ID. But to do that, we need to create few more methods with these informations to establish the connection. First, we will try to create one reusable method that could establish the connection and return the connection object to these multiple methods so that we don't have to repeat these DB credential informations in every database. I will create one new class in this project and I will name it as dbutil, and I will copy few lines here like the database credentials. Then I will create one public static method that returns a connection, which is going to have a name called get connection. And why I made this static is I can call the get connection directly by using the dbutil. Let me import this. And this get connection should connect to the database using the same method called connection equals driver manager dot get connection. And when we write this, it can return this connection. Because URL, username, password are not static, it is throwing an error. We will make all these things private, static, final, so that we cannot change this anywhere. And still we are getting this compilation error because get connection throws an SQL exception. But we will not handle it. Instead, we will propagate that to the caller so that caller will always invoke the get connection within the try. And now we can invoke the get connection method without using these informations in the methods like create profile and the get profiles. And if you create other methods to perform read or update or delete, they all should just reuse that method. So I will remove all these informations. Then here, instead of using driver manager.get connection, there is a get connection method in dbutil. Since it is a static method, I will directly use the class name to invoke it. Next, we will remove these three informations, and in place of driver manager.get connection, we will use dbutil.get connection, so that those three informations related to the database credentials and creating a connection object is completely now reduced with only few lines of code. That is, only one line of code is enough to establish the connection now. And the advantage we get is if we change the credentials, we can just do the changes only in this dbutil class. We will try to test the methods like select all records just to check out whether it's working or not after making the changes. Yes, we are still able to retrieve the record. It means even store also should work. What we will do now is we will try to create few more methods to perform the other operations like get profile based on ID, which takes the ID and that should return the profile object, so that from the client code you can get the profile. And one more method we will create is update profile, which is going to update the phone number based on ID. So I will use the parameters like ID and phone number that has to return the profile which is updated when you pass the ID and the new phone number you want to update. The last one we can create is delete profile, which accepts the ID, so that based on the ID you would delete the profile, and it can return some values like int value to just ensure that the profile record is deleted or not. If it is 1, it means it is updated. 0 means the profile is not actually present. So let's create the first method, get profile. Now this get profile based on the ID. We will use public profile get profile, and I will take ID as the parameter, and we will initialize this variable profile to null, and we will return the profile. But once I write the code in between these two lines, I should be able to get the profile object based on this ID. In case that ID is not present, the profile will be null. So we will use the try with resource, but we will just create the connection by using that reusable code. So that is connection equals dbutil dot get connection. We can create the query that is going to be select star from profile where ID equals to question mark, and then why this is throwing error. Yeah, we need to use a catch block. Let me use SQL exception, and we will print the exception messages. Then we need to set the value to the ID. So for that we need a prepare statement. Let me use prepare statement. Statement equals connection dot prepare statement, and we will pass the query. And lastly, we are going to use the result set. Result equals statement dot execute query. And what we need to understand is if I invoke execute query, the profile is not going to have this ID value, and when it is going to search the profile with the question mark, it is going to raise an error. So we should create this result set inside the try with resource with a nested try, because we need to set the statement. But you might ask, why don't you set the statement here itself? That is not possible, because the only statements you can write inside the try with resources, those instances that are implementing auto closable. Because setint is not implementing auto closable, it is going to raise an error. So we have to remove this line and write it in the nested try. Let's first set the ID by using statement dot set first question mark with the ID. Then we will use try with resource to get the result set. And here I will write result set result equals statement dot execute query. And then what we can do is we can write a while loop telling that result dot next, if it is getting the first record, or if the next method returns true, it means result is found, and I can get the profile information from the profile table and assign it to the profile variable. So we all know how to do that. We can create the profile object like this. Profile is equal to new profile. And what we can do is we can use the constructor to initialize all the properties. The first is ID, and to get the ID, we need to first call the getInt method by passing the column number. So we will be getting the value of ID column. Next is the name. We will use result dot get string. The name is in second column, and then let me break this to multiple lines. The third parameter is the phone number, so we will get the long value from the third column. So the last parameter is the local date. So first we will get the date from the table that is on fourth column, but we need to invoke the two local dates so that the date of SQL will be converted to the local date. So we have now the profile object initialized when the while loop is true, and then we don't have to close the resource because we are using try with resource, and the catch block which is written outside the nested try could able to handle the SQL exception. Now we can call the get profile method from main. What we will do, we will make use of this test select class which is already getting all the profiles. Before getting all the profiles, we will take the input from the scanner, that is going to be system.out.println, enter ID to read the profile, and we will create scanner object before that. Scanner equals to new scanner. Then what we will do is we will close it probably at the end. Then we will ask the user to enter the ID. Int ID equals to scanner dot next int, and we will call the get profile. By passing this ID, we are going to get the profile object. So profile equals DAO dot get profile ID, and we will write if profile is not equal to null, it means it should be able to print the profile, else we will print error telling that profile with an ID, the ID you pass from the scanner is not found, so that the client program can take care of probably handling the invalid data, like if it is null, it has to print an error, or if it is not null, it has to print the profile. Let's run this program. At the end, we will write one delimiter to just understand that after getting the profile by ID, it is listing all the profiles. Let me run this program and I will enter the ID 100, and if I hit enter, look at the output, it is printing the data whose ID is 100, name is Athav. Let me run this program by passing an invalid ID, 200 is not there. It is going to print profile with an ID 200 not found. So this way you can get the profile based on ID. Next, we will try to update the phone number based on ID as well as delete the profile based on ID. To do that, we will be creating two methods. Firstly, we will update the profile phone number based on the ID. We need to create a method that returns profile. Why it has to return profile means when you call the update profile method, that is update phone, by passing ID and the new phone number, we would update the phone number and the updated profile informations we can return. And here we will create a profile variable with the value null and we will return the profile. Then we will create a query. This time the query is going to be like this: update profile set phone number column equals to question mark and ID column equals to question mark. Please understand these are all actually the column names. Next, we will use the try with resource. Let me write the catch block first. That is going to handle the SQL exception. And here we can write first statement is connection equals the DB util get connection. Next is the prepare statement to update the query. We need to create the prepare statement by passing this query, and we cannot use result set because we are calling the update. Let's now try to set the question marks like this. This time we need to first set the phone number with the first question mark, and the second question mark should set the ID. So I write set long first question mark with phone number, then statement dot set int the second question mark with the ID. Now we can call the execute update method to execute this query after setting the values, and then we can return the profile who has the ID that you supply. We already have the get profile method which is doing the job of getting the profile based on ID. So what we can do is we can directly initialize the profile variable by calling the get profile method, and we can get that profile or null if the get profile is called, and later this profile is returned to the caller. So if caller invokes the update profile, either it is going to get the updated profile or it would get the null. And what test JDBC can do is it can take the ID and phone number, then pass that one to the update profile phone number. We will just comment these things except the close method. And what we will do is we will ask enter ID and initialize that ID variable. Then we will ask user to enter phone number and we will initialize the phone number variable. Then we can call the update profile phone number, which is going to return the profile. So DAO dot update profile phone number, pass the ID and phone number. We write if profile not equal to null, it has to print profile updated, and below is the profile information, and let us simply print the entire profile data. If it is null, we will print the error message telling that profile with an ID, the ID of supply not found. Let me run this program and see what happens. Now I enter the ID. Let me enter 100 and the phone number. Let me simply write some 9887734. ID is present. Because of that, it is. Oh, we have made a mistake, I think. What we have done is it is giving phone number equals to 1. Why it is taking phone number 1? Maybe there is some mistake. Set long, set int, update profile, set phone number. Oh, there is a mistake here. We should write where condition. So set the phone number where ID equals to question mark. So that was a mistake. Let us rerun the program. I think this time it is going to run fine. Let me enter the ID 100 and phone number like this. Then I should be able to see the updated phone number. Then if I go and run the select the profile based on ID, let me enter ID 100. It should get the user which has the ID 100 and all other records also. What is the last thing we should do is we should be able to delete the profile based on ID. For that we will create the method called delete the profile based on ID. So delete the profile based on ID. This time I will write int as the return type and method name is delete profile. Let it take an ID and this time the query is going to be what? Query is going to be delete from profile table where ID equals to question mark, and we will use the int status. Initially let it be 0 and try with resource. We will write with SQL exception in the catch block, then e.print stack trace. Let us create the connection object. Connection equals dbutil dot get connection. Then we will write the prepare statement. Statement equals connection dot prepare statement. We will pass that query and we will set the question mark by calling set int first question mark with ID that we will pass. Then we will initialize the status by using the statement dot execute update. The status value will be 1 in case the query is executed successfully and deletes the record, else it will be 0. Next, we will return that status outside the catch and we will call the delete profile from the main method. We will use the same test JDBC and I will just comment this much and I will pass the ID to the delete profile. Let me get the status and call the DAO dot delete profile by ID, and if status is greater than 0, I can print ID, that is profile with an ID deleted, else profile with an ID doesn't exist. Let's run this program. Let me enter the ID which is not there. I should get profile with an ID doesn't exist. And then if I enter the ID 103, it has to delete the profile who has the ID 103. And obviously next time if I run the program with 103, it has to give profile with an ID 103 doesn't exist. So the last thing what we can do is we can finalize this main method. If you look at the main method, we are commenting some method calls to test other method calls which is not flexible. What we can do is we can have a flexible code in the main method which can call all these CRUD methods which we are invoking, like create profile or the update profile or delete profile. So you can write a while loop, and inside the while loop you can write a switch case, so that when you run the client code, it doesn't do the operation immediately unless a request is made to do that particular operation. Because if I run this main method, it always does the delete profile operation. But it will be more flexible if we have more control over calling these methods. For that reason, we will have a loop and a switch case. So what I will do is I will remove all these statements except the scanner, and we will create one option variable which helps us to control the loop and switch case. And I will use the do while loop with an option called option not equal to -1. It has to exit if the option is -1. So I write here program exits visit again, and here also something like this. And we will ask the user to enter these options, like enter options. What are the options? One is to insert profile data. Then we will copy these lines and change the print statements. Second line is to probably read profile data by ID. Then the third option is to update profile phone number by ID. The fourth option is to delete the profile by ID, delete profile by ID. We will also keep two more print statements. The fifth one is going to read all the profiles, read all profile data, and lastly -1 is to exit. This is to exit. And whatever the input you enter, we will store it in the option variable. And now let me just run this program. It continuously runs. See, if I enter 1, it is going to again ask you to enter the options. If I enter 2, again it will ask you to enter the options. And if I enter -1, it exits. But in between the do while, we will write a switch case like this: switch with option, and we will write the case numbers like this: case 1, the break statement; case 2, the break statement; case 3, break statement; case 4, break; then case 5, break; then default would print invalid option, or you have entered -1, something like this. If option is not equal to -1, we can print invalid option like this. So this is the default case. Let's now write the first case. In case 1, we will ask user to enter name, phone number, and DOB in this format, and all the data we will enter in new line, so that I can directly create a profile object and pass those inputs to the setter methods like this: set name scanner dot next, then profile dot set phone number scanner dot next long, and then profile dot set DOB. Here you should use local date parse, then scanner dot next method. Then we will pass the profile object to the create profile, and we know that create profile returns an ID. We will write int generated ID equals DAO dot create profile and pass the profile object, and we will print here profile stored with an ID, that is generated ID. Let me implement case 5 so that I can show case 1 and case 5. Let me call the method called get profiles. As it is returning the list, I will write here list. We can directly print this by using the for loop. We will write profile colon list and we will print the profile. So let me write one delimiter after printing each profile, something like this. And now we can test, insert and retrieve. Let me enter the value 1 and enter name like Rakesh and then some phone number and date of birth, and it should say ID is 104, and if I enter 5 it should able to retrieve all the records, and you can also see the Rakesh. And case 2 is to read the profile based on ID. Let me ask user to enter ID, and the ID value I will take from the scanner like this, and we will pass the profile ID to the get method of profile, that is get profile based on ID. And we already have this profile variable declared in the case 1, so that's why I am just reusing it. And we will write here if profile not equal to null, it is going to print the profile, else it is going to print an error message saying that profile with an ID not found. Then the case number 3 is to update the phone number by ID. We will ask the user to enter ID, then the ID variable is going to get the input, then ask the user to enter phone number, then we will create the phone number variable, and then we will pass the ID and phone number to the update profile, and it is going to return the profile object. What we will do is we can write here if profile not equal to null, it can actually print the data like this. Let me just copy paste the lines which are there in the case number 2 so that it can print the profile as well as the error message. The last case is to delete. So we will ask the ID, and then what we will do is we will call the method called delete, which is returning the integer, and this is going to be the status. And what is the status? We will write if status is greater than 0, it means profile with an ID is deleted. Else we write an error message called profile with an ID not found. This is the error message. So that's it. Now we are able to run this program until we enter -1, and it has more control now and it is more flexible. Let me run this program. We have already tested the first and the fifth option. What we will do is we will try to enter the second option and we will enter 102, where we are able to get the 102 value. Then we will enter 3, where we need to enter the ID, that is 102, and let us enter the phone number for Ravi, that is like this. And now the phone number for the ID 102 is updated, and we can also delete the record. Let me enter 101, and the profile with an ID 101 is deleted, and if I enter option number 5, it should actually show only those data which are present in the table.